President Trump sharply criticizing his Attorney General Jeff Sessions, telling the New York Times that he never would have nominated him had he known that Sessions would recuse himself from the Russia investigation.
So Jeff Sessions takes the job, gets into the job, recuses himself. I then have, which frankly, I think is very unfair to the president. How do you take a job and then recuse yourself? If he would have recused himself before the job, I would have said, thanks, Jeff, but I can't, I'm not going to take you. It's extremely unfair, and that's a mild word, to the president. So he recuses himself. I then end up with a second man who's a deputy.
The Attorney General, meanwhile, responding a short time ago. Listen to this.
I have the honor of serving as Attorney General. It's something that goes beyond any thought I would have ever had for myself. We love this job, we love this department, and I plan to continue to do so as long as that is appropriate.
There you go. Joe Trippi is the former Howard Dean campaign manager and a Fox News contributor, and Carrie Lucas is the president of the Independent Women's Forum. Carrie, I bet you that Jeff Sessions has heard that diatribe at least a couple times by now, that nothing he heard from the New York Times was news. What do you think?
You're probably right, and I think that this is, this is kind of an interesting development, but I bet a lot of American people are getting frustrated with this constant palace intrigue. It was such a relief to have the president talking about health care and urging Congress to get back to work on that, and that's what the American people want. I think it's enough of this focus on who's doing the investigating, and we want people to get back in Washington to get back to really trying to make things work and trying to turn our economy around and improve health care and get to tax reform. I think that's where we need to kind of push back and get the conversation back to that.
Joe, what do you make of that? I mean, I bet the Attorney General probably isn't going anywhere based on what we heard at the beginning of this interview. What is your thought?
Well, one, I don't think he's going anywhere. That's clear. I mean, first of all, his Senate seat, the primary is already underway and the filing deadline's closed. I don't think he joined the administration to retire from politics 6 months into it, the first term. But I also think, look, when you look at this, the president could have spent that time with the New York Times talking about health care, talking about what he wanted the Senate to do, much like he did with the meeting with the senators. But instead, it was him. It was the president himself.
Are you sure that this just isn't the excerpt that the New York Times is focusing on and serving up, that he did talk about those other things?
They put the entire transcript out there, I'm pretty sure. No, this is like, he's the one. First of all, point taken. But he's the one that did that. He's the one that sat there and talked about Jeff Sessions and Comey and Mueller and re-litigated this whole thing again, which he's done time and time again when the White House has, tried to stay disciplined and talk about health care and the other things that the American people would like to see something move forward on. It's the president himself who keeps derailing this with either his tweets or these kinds of conversations with reporters.
So, Carrie, I mean, taking the flip side of that, is that the case, or is the president transparent and honest and he says what's on his mind? And if he doesn't say what's on his mind, then people accuse him of hiding things. If he does, then you have places like the Huffington Post saying that he's, derailed and unhinged and, he's going on a bizarre rant and that sort of thing. I mean, it seems like he can't win either way.
Well, absolutely. And clearly the New York Times wants to do this president absolutely no favors. So there's no doubt that they're going to focus on whatever they think is most damaging. And, I think that there is, obviously, I think there's a lot of people in the White House who get frustrated when the president seems to aid the distraction and move the conversation back to things like Russia. But this president's done an awful good job talking to the American people, getting around the press and getting his message out. So yeah, I mean, the media is an obstacle, but he's shown that he's able to overcome it sometimes.
Joe, I mean, is it possible when we say move the conversation back, there's a bunch of conversations going on right now, and the people that are focused on policy are focused on health care, and they're watching that. And the people who really don't like the president continue to read and click on sites that deride him, and that's their right. I mean, that's what they want to read about, and that's what they go look at, and that's what the New York Times and Huffington Post and MSNBC, they all focus on these negative stories because that's what their audience likes, and they're all businesses, so that makes sense. Everybody focus on the conversation you like. What do you think of that theory?
I think, look, it was the president and his people who decided to sit him down with the New York Times. I'm sure the New York Times loved it, but they had a purpose. He had a purpose to sit down with them. When you talk about he's out there open and talks about what's on his mind, what was on his mind wasn't health care. It was Russia and Mueller and Comey and Sessions, who, by the way, was his only supporter in the U.S. Senate, was with him every step of the way until he started to get traction. It was Sessions who helped him get there. And he's no longer a senator because he's the attorney general. And at a time when you're trying to get 52 senators in the Republican Party to agree on something, they have to look at this and say, wow, can we count on him to stand with us if he won't stand with Jeff Sessions when he does the right thing under the law?
Or is he showing, I'm really going to throw you under the bus if you don't do what I want and you don't go along. I mean, maybe that was the method behind this madness, is that he was saying, here's what I'll do. And I mean, did he go down this road out of the clear blue, or was he asked the question?
But, Melissa, if he'll throw Jeff Sessions under the bus, who won't he throw under the bus? I mean, that's what I think. If you're a U.S. Senator, GOP senator right now, you have to wonder about that. Look at what he's been putting.
I don't think you have to wonder. I think you know. If you don't go along, you're going right under the bus with everybody else. It's going to get crowded under there, guys. Hopefully we won't join them.
Try to get to 52 votes doing that, though.
Thanks
That's
to both
a
of you.
problem.
We'll see. Absolutely.
Sure.
Thanks.